More on this story, we can bring in France 24's chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Rob, you were listening to both men speak earlier in Geneva. Now, these talks were aimed at diffusing tensions over Ukraine. In your opinion, have they done that?
Well, they haven't changed very much. I think the very fact that they're speaking to each other does help diffuse tensions, does put off a final decision on what's going to happen. But the fact of the matter is that enormous force threat that Russia has assembled on the Ukrainian border, both north, east, and south, remains there, and if anything, is building up. So the tensions will remain. As Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, said, if you want to de-escalate, the way to do that is move the troops away from the border. But at this point, there is absolutely no sign that the Russians are prepared to do that. That said, the talks are going to continue. We heard both men say that the Americans will respond, as the Russians have been asking for some time now, in written form to the demands that the Russians have been making, that, for instance, Ukraine or Georgia or any other former country of the USSR should not be accepted into NATO, that countries that join, Eastern European countries that joined NATO after 1997 should be forced to leave, that there shouldn't be military exercises carried out in those territories, that NATO, in other words, withdraw to its pre-1997 position. It's not going to happen. But Antony Blinken is going to give a written response to those demands that the Russians has met. And, as he made clear today in that press conference we've just seen, he will make demands from the Western side as well. He will demand reciprocity. He will suggest measures on, for instance, risk reduction, on greater military transparency. For instance, when you conduct a military exercise, you have to give advance warning to NATO. That didn't happen, for instance, in the most recent military maneuvers in Belarus. The NATO didn't get forewarning of what's been happening in Western Russia on the border with Ukraine and so on and so forth. And possibility of arms reduction as well. We know already that the Russian response is likely to be, at best, dismissive. There are many who would suggest that the Russian demands themselves were never intended to be taken seriously. It was absolutely clear, in other words, to the Russians when they made the demands to NATO and the US that they would be rejected. It was never going to be possible that NATO would say okay to its no to its open door policy, for instance. But it's fairly clear at this stage that this diplomacy at some stage is going to come to a juddering halt. And the question is, at that point, what happens?
Because I want to ask you something, because when Sergei Lavrov spoke earlier, he basically accused the West of being hysterical when it came to Ukraine. And he said Russia has no plans to invade the country. Do we believe him, given that 100,000 troops are sitting on the border with Ukraine, on Russia's side of the border?
Antony Blinken's response to this is that, look, this is not about emotion. It's about, first of all, facts. And secondly, it's about history. And the facts are that there are over 100,000 Russian troops now on the border with Ukraine, and presumably they're there for a purpose. They've been there already for a little over a month, and they show no sign of going away. On the contrary, they seem to be building up. And as he reminded people, there is precedent, there is history. In 2014, Russia invaded Crimea, which is a part of Ukraine. And since then, Russians have been supporting separatists in eastern Ukraine as well. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia, having previously conducted military exercises in Russia's northern Caucasus region, which borders northern Georgia. And at the time, the Russians said, look, this is not a threat to Georgia. These are just routine military exercises. And then the invasion happened. So when Blinken says, look, this is not hysteria, this is not emotion, this is about facts and history, he has previous to go on.
And do you expect that, what role do you expect Europe will help play in diffusing tensions now that the United States has had this face-to-face meeting? Because they did seem to leave the door open of a higher level meeting happening between the US president and Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I mean, again, Antony Blinken was clear about this. He said, first of all, before we get to the stage where we can have a presidential summit between Blinken and Putin, progress has to be made at foreign minister level. Whilst those talks continue, and we know that they're going to continue next week, the
written responses.
Written response will be sent by the Americans to the Russians. Presumably after that, there will be another meeting between Antony Blinken and Sergei Lavrov. And in the meantime, the Europeans will be talking amongst themselves and to the Americans about the best way forward. We know, for instance, that the German Chancellor Scholz is meeting Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday. They will be seeking to coordinate their position. But I think it's almost certain that at this stage, given the high stakes that are involved here, that the Europeans will make absolutely certain that their position is totally coordinated with that of the United States.
We'll see how it pans out in the days to come. Thank you very much for that, Rob Parsons there.